Did Spotify really purge a million tracks? Elvis Costello penned the lyrics, "Radio is a sound salvation, radio is cleaning up the nation," which infamously led him to being banned from SNL for 12 years. We're not going to talk about that, but we are going to talk about radio. So let's get to it. Welcome to Music Industry City's Tuesday Talkies to discuss what's going on in the world of music business. I'm Peter Schwing, and joining me is my co-host, Sam Tall. If there's something you'd like to chime in about, join us in the chat or leave some comments below. It's okay. You don't have to be shy. We want to hear what you want to talk about, and we'll get some other people on, and we have a great conversation, chit-chat. We also stick around for the after show. Sometimes what we do is after we run the end credits, we magically reappear. And that's when, if you're in the chat, you get to ask us some behind the scenes questions, kind of like that off the record, but we're kind of on the record. So anyway, coming up on today's show, we have a special guest, Adam Lewis, CEO of Planetary Group. It's a leading artist development and promotions firm that focuses on helping new and upcoming artists be heard and discovered through radio, online PR, and Spotify playlisting. Recently, he's worked with such acts as Soccer Mommy, I'm a big fan, Arlo Parks, Courtney Barnett, Kate LeBon, The Districts, Fits in the Tantrums, and Portugal the Man. We're going to do a dig deep into why radio is still important. But first, Spotify. The other day, industry veteran Wallace Collins posted an article claiming that Spotify enacted a massive global takedown of music from thousands of independent artists. Quote, and this is going to be the quote here, "Upon information and belief, some 750,000 songs were removed, the vast majority of which appears to have used DistroKid for distribution. It appears no major label artists have been affected, nor has any major label been taken down as part of this purge." Let's turn to Sam Tall with his thoughts on this. Sam, how you doing?
Hey, Peter.
Hey.
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good. So this was interesting, and I mean that's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah.
Almost a 750,000. I do want to just before get into it, I just want to also post up because this ties it all together. The Spotify FAQ, and it states, "Any service that claims to offer guaranteed placement on playlists on Spotify in exchange for money are in violation of our terms and conditions, and they shouldn't be used." So there's a lot to talk about. And I know there's gaming the system, there's playlisting, there's the Wolfpack Silent album, there's people that are doing just meditate, recording the sound of a fan.
Right.
There's a lot going on. So give me a quick little rundown. What is it that that caught your eye on this article?
So there's a couple of things. Firstly, there's sort of this conjecture that there's 750,000 tracks, all independent, no major, mostly using DistroKid. And it's what a travesty for independent artists. And Spotify seems to have done this with no sort of rhyme or reason or really notice or any of that kind of stuff. Okay, that's not a fair read of what happened. Firstly, if Spotify decides that they want to purge a bunch of white noise tracks or algorithmically generated music that doesn't constitute real artistry, and we're not talking about the Epidemic Sound, fake artist scandal from a couple of years ago. Those aren't fake artists. That's just production music. But we're talking about actual fake music that's computer generated algorithmically and not actually created with an artistic intent, but purely for the purposes of scraping engagement off the platform, diverting revenues from the pool model away. Longtime viewers of this show will kind of hear the dog whistle in that. I'm a big fan of the user-centric payment models, and this is a big reason why. But the sort of argument that this doesn't affect majors and so that's an independent artist's problem is major labels by and large aren't signing white noise algorithmically generated sound companies, right? So of course it's not going to impact them. It's not because it's Spotify's oh well, we need to protect the majors and our shareholders. They sold a lot of their equity. It's not even that big of a deal anymore. Of course, this is going to impact creators that use DistroKid. DistroKid is one of the cheapest options in the marketplace for funneling a boatload of music all at once into the system. So it's not like they're targeting DistroKid. They're just targeting things that happen to be on DistroKid by and large because it's more expensive to be someplace else. The second thing that really kind of bugs me about this is Spotify is playing trash collection instead of proactively engineering something that prevents this. So yeah, Spotify did the right thing in my opinion, by trying to clean up what's going on, try to disrupt a lot of what's happening around like bot streams and paid plays and like faking the system to try and scrape out some revenue from a model that is set up to pay out based on usage and not based on engagement. But as Peter Slattery over at 10 reported over the span of multiple weeks and possibly months, basically kind of writing what he calls the cheater's guide to Spotify, you can basically game Spotify's rather rudimentary search engine. So if you, for example, create a playlist that's called, Joker Soundtrack 2019, people are going to think that might be the album, or A Star Is Born soundtrack official, whatever. You can use the artwork because it's user-generated content. You can put a lot of the tracks on there and then fill it with stuff that's not even related to the film. And you can garner streams that are totally fake. And that's a legitimate enough use of the platform because it's a user-generated playlist, and maybe it infringes some trademarks around the film company, but it's not Spotify that has to, police that. And so as a result, Spotify is happy to let it happen. But it's also a big part of why Spotify, which originally was very adamant about supporting user-generated playlists and community curation, realized like that might not be the best way forward, and they've really overemphasized their own in-house editorial and curation. So aside from that, Spotify is supposed to limit the delivery of content that has metadata comprising almost entirely of like SEO catchphrases, but apparently that's not what's happening. They're not necessarily doing, the cleanest job of getting that off the system. And so you end up with large purges like this, which make for juicy headlines, but in reality are just normal garbage collection. So that's kind of like my read on it. Dealing with a lot of the UGC stuff that I do in the YouTube sense, I'm very sort of in touch with the dreck that appears on platforms that are open to user delivery. And so Spotify, by virtue of cheap distribution, is one of them. But at the same time, we don't know yet, and we may not ever know if this impacted any legitimate artists unfairly. My guess is that if that were the case, we'd hear about it at some point soon. And if it's not the case, Spotify is just going to not say very much about this and just call it normal procedure. Just like when they test new features that people don't like, they say, oh, it's just a normal test.
Right. And Spotify released a statement saying it was more like tens of thousands as opposed to 750,000. So it's like this is real big difference between those numbers. And
there seems to be no source for where that number came from in the first place.
Exactly.
It's sort of just like upon information and belief. It's like whose information and what belief.
Right. And then to even take it next to another level is that the claim that it seemed to be mostly on DistroKid. Now, I mean, is he taken from a small sample size of like artists that he works with? And let's look at the relationship of Spotify and DistroKid.
Right. I mean, Spotify relies on DistroKid for a lot of quality independent content.
And aren't they part owner? Doesn't Spotify have
they have, they took kind of equity, I think, and invested in DistroKid. And frankly, that's a good thing, but in my opinion, but at the same time, like there's no doubt that DistroKid's whole business model is based on volume regardless of performance. It's good business to be in. But at the same time, it enables sort of access to a marketplace that maybe isn't ideal. I don't know whose responsibility that ends up having to be, whether it's Spotify, DistroKid, or the people who are actually delivering the content.
Exactly. So we're gonna circle back around in a little bit to flesh out this conversation even a little bit more, because we have a person that a special guest that is. He knows about playlisting. He also knows a lot about radio. So I'm going to kick on over to him. Thanks, Sam. All right. So Adam Lewis is no stranger to the business. Before launching Planetary Group, he was Northeast Sales and Promotion Manager for TVT Records, working with Seven Dust, Guided by Voices, The Black Crowes, and Snoop Dogg. Not too shabby. He knows his way around marketing and radio. Please welcome Adam Lewis. Adam, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm well. Yeah, I'm
Hey.
well, thanks. Good to see you as well.
Last time I saw you was at a conference in real life, and that was a long, long time ago.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, it's the longest I've been in one place at one time since I was probably in high school. So I'm normally traveling nonstop, going to festivals, conferences, seeing bands. I've flown over 2 million miles, but none in the last year. So my last trip was New Colossus in March in New York.
They got that in. Yeah, they got that in just kind of in that gray area shutdown. It was like that week.
I love those guys, and I understand why they did it. I mean, it was really probably shouldn't have happened. I was in pianos, and it was a weird thing because I was in New York, and people are still hugging and shaking hands and wanted to, come up and lean into you at a show and talk to you, and they're basically spitting on you, Whereas I'm coming from LA, I was used to. We had already stopped doing that 2 or 3 weeks earlier.
Right.
No shaking hands or any of that. And I was just shocked how packed it was at pianos. I actually only stayed for one band. I had clients playing that night. I walked out. I just felt so unsafe. And I was proven right because one of the performers that night did get sick and caught it at that event. So anyway, that was my last conference, but not to go off track. But,
Nothing.
it was just weird to be in New York City when, Broadway closed, NBA closed. That was a crazy moment. Time in history, and I got the hell out of there. I got on the next plane out of there.
Yeah, well, you would have been possibly stuck in New York.
That was my fear. It was having to drive back to LA, and trying to get a rental.
Oh, well, you finally would get that cross country trip you always dreamed about doing. But you've been on the road before. You've been on the road before, so you've seen enough. So
I've seen every rest stop.
So what one thing, and it's always a pleasure to see on Facebook. I know you always do this hashtag Radio Promo 101. And
right.
And that was one of the things. It was kind of it's such simple advice for artists and people in the industry. And I mean, I can imagine the absurd emails that you've received over your course of the career. It's hey, I want to be on radio. I want to be top 40. I want to be these markets, and I'm releasing it next week. How do we make this happen? So, those kind of things, and then setting expectations. But the big question and it's been going for years, and now we're as we've been going more and more into Spotify and digital and everything, terrestrial radio. So when we talk about radio, I know you have, I want you to get to what you have to say about radio, but I just want to clarify for everybody listening. It's we're discussing terrestrial radio, the stuff that you're listening in the car, you have to turn the knob to find it. This isn't the SoundCloud radio, the Pandora, Spotify radio, TuneIn. So let me first, why is radio still important?
Yeah, so you have to look at it, you have to look at radio in the different formats of radio, right? So, commercial radio is a very different thing than non-commercial radio. So, as an independent artist, as a new artist, your options for exposure on commercial radio are very limited. But non-commercial radio is fantastic, and so many people think, oh, radio's dead, or, no one listens to radio anymore. Listen, at the end of the day, there's still a lot of people listening to radio. The numbers are still there. They may not be the glory days of radio, but there's still a hell of a lot of places playing, music out there. And if you do it right, if you target it right and go after the right formats, as a new artist, still great place to start, really supported place to start getting some attention. So, when you start thinking about, KXP in Seattle and KCRW here in Los Angeles and WFUV in New York, I mean, these are stations that believe in presenting and curating all types of great new music and new artists. And, there's a lot of stations out there that do that. And, those type of stations have real DJs, real programmers that are picking actual music to play. And it's not, a syndicated show or a computer algorithm. Top 40 is a wasteland, right? But non-commercial radio and college radio can be great. There's great curation there and great DJs that care about what they're presenting. So in that sense, radio's still great. Plenty of people, still listening. Listening habits have obviously changed a little bit this past year. People are listening online. They're listening on their apps. They're listening, they're listening on TuneIn and whatnot. They're not, they might not be listening to the morning show like they were even at non-com. They're listening to the midday show and the afternoon shows and whatnot. People still do want curation, right? And people do want a sense of community, and I think radio can still provide that, and good radio can provide that. Commercial radio, they're just so dumb. They just keep cutting costs and just making, trying to have one DJ do 50 shows on 50 different stations that there's no reason to listen to that. No one's going to sit around to hear the top 20 countdown chart when they can just hit it on Spotify in a second. Right. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about non-commercial radio. We're talking about true curation. That area is still fantastic for certain type of artists to get the ball rolling. And it's a supportive place. A lot of these people that are working at these stations, they're working for free or they're low paid, they're volunteering and they should be getting paid. If they are getting paid, they should probably be getting paid double, but they're doing it out of passion. And these are the people that you want to be embracing your new art, your new artist, right? They're going to spread the word. And that's what's great about it. And then that's what's really supportive about it.
Yeah, and we have out, on Long Island, but New York, Stony Brook, WUSB, which that format is all over the place. It covers everything and the kitchen sink. But I was tuning in as Rockin' Robin was filling in as a host, and you still get these some of the classic people that are still they're playing some of their favorites. They're playing let's have the prog rock hour or here, but also they're in there playing new music to expose you to that. I mean, years ago, going back to probably 80s and 90s, commercial radio still had the opportunity to be a station that broke a genre. But now those stations and the way the formats are, if I tune into BCN today, they're still playing this. Well, yeah. But the last time I tuned into them, a couple of years ago, and I'm using this as a reference, it was still 20 years later, I would tune in. And I was like, oh, I wonder what they're up to these days. And they were still playing the same exact set list that I was listening to when I was wearing flannel, picking up records at Newberry Comics. So in this day and age, the commercial stations can't break. So you don't have that opportunity to be the breakers of this new genre. So like I said, non-commercial college radio. So how does one, how do you approach this? I mean, artists can, go out and try to reach the program director, or they go through a company like yours. So tell us a little bit what what Planetary Group does and, what your process, how do you approach something like that and working with an artist? When an artist approaches you, what are the expectations set and what are you looking for if you were to work with somebody?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we want to work with something that's great and interesting and fun and different and that we think we can get airplay for, right? I don't want to call up it keeps us honest. I'm not going to send shit out there because, people aren't going to take my phone calls, right? So, we want to work with good stuff. Expectations have to be in line in that if you're a brand new artist, you're generally not going to get played on the biggest stations right from the get-go. You have to, radio's like anything, and that you have to work on building a relationship and awareness, at the format. But it's really straightforward. We're using our relationship with these stations to get people to listen to music, right? So we're sending them music every week. We send them music 50 weeks out of the year, and we've been sending them music for 25 years. So they know why we're sending them stuff. They know why we're calling. They're used to getting material, from us. And we're using our relationship to get them to listen to it. And hopefully they'll play it, but more importantly, we'll get feedback from them, see what they think, see how it's going. I can't make someone play a record. All I can do is make sure they listen to it and give it a fair shake and give us feedback. At the end of the day, the music has to stand on its own feet, and hopefully it's well received. Obviously, we try to put ourselves in the best position possible, to get those results, from folks. So we're looking for stuff that's interesting that we think can work at the format. The good thing about college and non-com is that there is a lot of diversity. You can work a singer-songwriter. There are, there's shows that have singer-songwriter shows. There's folk shows, singer-songwriter shows, acoustic shows. There's heavy metal shows, hip-hop shows, metal shows, electronic shows, women in music, world music, reggae. You can work lots of different styles of music. I always use the example, a couple of years ago, we had the final album from Motorhead going for ads at radio the same week as we had a new album from the Blind Boys of Alabama with Bon Iver. So I had a gospel record and a heavy metal record starting at the exact same time at radio. You can't do either of those at commercial radio, but at non-com, both of those records did really well, that's the joy of that format, is you can work really fun and different things there. So yeah, I encourage people to try to do some radio on their own. You can always, if you're a band in a certain market, you can always reach out to your college stations in those markets and try to get some airplay, and you probably will get some. It'll drive you a little nuts because dealing with students and their pickiness and their office hours and whatnot, is not easy. And that's really what you're hiring a company like us for, is that we know the best way to contact every station. Some stations only want to be called, some only want to be emailed, some have office hours between 2 and 3 on the third Tuesday of the month, and it makes life hard, so, but we know all of that. So we know how to reach folks, and that will, when you're doing it yourself, will drive you crazy. I always like it when someone has done a campaign themselves, because when they call us for the next record, they'll generally hire us because I know they don't want to.
Yeah. They're like, I don't want to do that again.
I'm all for DIY. We all kind of come out of that world in the beginning, right? I managed a band and was in the van and all of that. I know what it. Radio is one of the smartest things to outsource because it takes so much time, and you have to repeat it every single week. There's 200 plus stations out there. 300, depending on how aggressive you're being, and they all have to be called every single week. And if you're going to do that, that is literally the only thing that you're going to work on for your band and for your artist at that time for a 2-month period while you're working your record, because there's no time for you to work on songwriting, rehearsing, booking shows, anything else that you might be doing. You have to call the stations every single week because there's a new chart every week and you're playing that game. So it really is the smartest thing to kind of outsource if you can, if it makes sense.
Well, I always look at it as many artists, they get to the release date and that's when they stop. They haven't thought about, and that's when is the time to let it go. Is to put it in other people's hands, to take it, and so you can go focus on your next, when we get back to live, if you're going to go do a tour cycle, or you're going to do a series of online live streamed events or concert series or something like that in this day and age.
I love using radio for looking for shows. If you're getting airplay in 20 different markets across the country, and good markets that you could, get to on a pretty easy basis, now you got a reason to play those markets. If you pair that up with your Spotify research, maybe 5 of those 10 are really strong markets. Now you've got a reason to go to that city, and you can get the station involved in the show. You can get an interview at that station, and you have an advocate in the market for you that's helping to bring people out. And that. So I'm a big fan of doing stuff like that.
So really interesting. I want to bring Sam back up here because, we were talking about the Spotify playlist, and the conversation for the last few years has always been, how do I get on a playlist? How do I get on a playlist? How do I get without the conversation so much as radio? So I want to kind of bring these in here together. So let's bring Sam back up. Sam, how you doing? All right.
It's a pleasure to hear your thoughts and to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I do want to just start off with just the Spotify playlisting. And, Adam, you heard what we were talking about a little bit. Like, what are your thoughts on this, the system, on the, there's a difference between hiring a promotions company to help get you Spotify playlists, as opposed to hiring a company that says, we guarantee you 1 million plays in the next month.
Yeah, well, I'd kind of run away from any company that kind of guarantees you anything. That's a general rule. My Facebook feed is full of 25 different companies I've never heard of on a daily basis that all do Spotify promotion, right? And to me, it's all like, I don't know one company that I could refer people to in that department that I would actually trust, and to be honest about it. So it is definitely the wild, wild west. There's just so much bullshit, so much scamming, so much pay to play going on. And I would caution folks. I mean, obviously what just happened this week, is a cautionary tale, but I would also caution people in terms of your marketing. People are so obsessed with Spotify playlists and whatnot, and I understand that. But if you're going to just be in that column, in that silo, you're only going to exist in that silo. Like, you can't not promote across the board. You still have to do radio, you still have to do online PR, and you still have to do social media, and you still have to do DSP promotion, right? You have to do all of them, and it sucks because it's a lot. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of money, and a lot of time. But if you're just going to be in the Spotify, echo system, if you will, you're going to be in trouble. I mean, we get hired. Bands will call us, and it's like, we've got 20 million plays on this song, but we're not drawing anyone. And I'll go to their show in Los Angeles. They literally will have millions of plays, and they can't draw 10 people.
Well, that's part Los Angeles. So
yeah, but listen, you should always be able to draw here, and the problem is people do have to remember that Spotify, in a lot of ways, as great as it is still just kind of a library card system, right? The old, everything's there, but you have to. It's passive, and then playlists are passive. Like, I'll listen to a playlist, I don't know who I'm listening to half the time, or the playlist is playing, and I get a phone call, and the band gets credit for that play, but I have no idea what I heard of it. They're phantom plays, right? So, you got to be cautious on just, I think when I look at the difference between non-com radio and Spotify, I always look at Spotify is making fans of a song in a lot of ways, and I feel like non-commercial radio is making fans of the artist because they're playing multiple tracks in rotation, and there's more of a connection there. So when you're comparing the two, so that's what I would always just kind of caution people with on Spotify. We obviously all use it and we all like it. I just think that you just have to kind of look at the bigger picture and be a little bit more well-rounded in that world.
I see.
I have a bit of a question.
Oh, go for it. Yeah, I was just about to say, I saw Sam smirking and smiling and nodding. So
I like to react. Living emoticons. So for context for this, Adam, I recently started advising a friend of mine who's a fashion publicist and launched his own firm, and it's been a very successful first 6 or 7 months of business. But it's given me a new appreciation for the craft of publicity and marketing around a very competitive space. Coming from an artist management background for the past 10 years, I have been just so cynical about marketing in general of any type. Playlisting, least of all, but also press is a tough game in music because it's very blog dominant and the blogs are losing power. And then the top press is like hard to reach. Radio is, of course, area of consolidation. And then we're talking about non-com, which, is very broad and can get very deep, but also is not like a lucrative driver for publishing. So there's a lot of sort of like variables, risks and rewards, and unknowns. And so what I want to ask you is, when artists specifically are considering their marketing options and considering their sort of overall campaign spread, let's, state for the record that short-term thinking helps nobody, and that, if you're trying to drive press in the next 3 months, you're probably not going to get what you're looking for, or radio play for that matter. But when we talk about dollar in, dollar out, when we talk about the ROI, generally what kind of patience and what kind of lead time and what kind of elements, aside from the music being great and the artist being willing and budgeted, do artists need to be committing to and being prepared for in order to really kind of accomplish goals that, in your opinion, measure up as like a successful push?
Yeah, well, I mean, I hate the fact that the term ROI has ever even entered the conversation in the music business. It's all these the damn tech MBA people that brought that in. It's listen, you're going to have to spend money, and you're probably not going to see. Most artists are overnight sensations 3 or 5 years in the making. Right. So, in terms of really being serious and spending money and going for it, the days of, spend money here, see instant blow up results 3, 4, 5 months down the line here are I don't know if I want to say over, but they're definitely, it just takes time these days. So, I mean, to do all these type of campaigns are kind of a step-by-step thing. A college radio campaign could set you back a couple grand. A non-com campaign could set you back, $4 to $5 grand, depending on, kind of how aggressive you're being, and then as you go to each format, it kind of goes up, right? In terms of that, press could be, on the low end could be, anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 a month to $2 or $3 grand a month. Again, it depends on the scope of what you're doing and the size of the firm and how big your release is. You might be doing a press campaign for just 1 month and just doing like a standalone single or a video, or you might be doing an EP type campaign where you've got several assets coming out before that EP. So that might be a 3-month campaign or a 4-month campaign, or you might be doing an album, same thing, with multiple assets, and you might be doing that for 4 or 5 months. So it definitely can get expensive for sure. But I would tell you how much money, time, and effort did you spend making the record? And the thought of just putting your record up on Spotify and people thinking that they're going to find it, it's just not going to happen. Like, you've got to spend money on marketing. And I think that artists that do a bit of all of it are the ones that, will win in the end. But I think, but it will take time. You very well might not be on this release. It might be on the next one. But the work that you did on this release will totally set up your next record. Especially, your first. As a publicist on a brand new artist, I'm spending 2/3 of that campaign just explaining who the hell you are, where are you from, what are you about, what's the story, why do people care, and I'm finding fans. And you come back with another asset or another release, I don't have to do that. I've already got maybe a pool of 75 stations or whatnot that I can go to from day one and say, hey, you played the last record, let's jump on this and build on top, right? That's where you start seeing you pay off. I mean, the artists that we've had the most success at radio with have done 2 or 3 releases in a row, in short order. Maybe they did 3 EPs in 2 years or something. And that's been kind of with overseas bands too, before they even come into the market. Because it's so expensive to come here. So they put their money into promotion until there's a reason to come. Repetition, really key, and again, that's just spending more money, probably not what you really want to hear.
But it's actually not a bad response. And so kind of it leads me to sort of my next like major sort of plot point on this, which is as a manager of largely independent acts who's also had the opportunity to sign some of those independent acts to major labels and seeing the pros and cons of that, being not much of a difference just in terms of bigger budgets, but not much bigger results, or in many cases, independent artists that have smaller budgets and smaller kind of investment, but bigger results because they have more control and they have more sort of like personal skin in the game, as it were. I think what I want to kind of hear from you on the note of like repetition, on the note of like investing in it and really kind of being patient about driving it and not giving up. I think there's a lot of artists who would rely on things that are like guaranteed stream, play, platforms, et cetera, because they can kind of do like the math on like, okay, this many streams times this penny rate means I'm going to get this much money out. So it's only going to cost me net this. But of course, they're not factoring in the collateral damage to their catalog and the bad audience that isn't there. For those artists who bring multiple projects to Planetary Group, or friends of yours at other companies that do different things that you don't, and can kind of like build a holistic and complete campaign that works. What are you seeing as the kinds of markers of, okay, this is working and this is worth continuing to invest in and continuing to double down on, as opposed to what I've seen all too often, which is, well, I didn't get any press in the first couple of months, or I'm not getting any radio in the first 3 months of my like 6-month campaign, so I want to cut it early, when in reality they probably even haven't hit the ribbon of gold under the dirt.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think radio is you can definitely, definitely on the college non-com side, I think repetition really helps, in terms of cutting through and building a story there. And like, I mean, we got 3 records right now in the top 200 from Guided by Voices, because they had 3 records out in 2020. Now, that's a band that's been around forever, but they shouldn't be relevant to a bunch of 20-year-old college kids, but they are, because they've had a consistent stream of music. And they've never kind of stopped sending music to that format, right? So, in that sense, repetition, really works for them. To have a top 20 record by that band is kind of, on one level, amazing, and on another level, absurd, right? So yeah, I mean, having a steady stream of music, not giving up. I mean, you shouldn't be thinking on the radio side, on the non-com college side, you should not have a DSP strategy as it relates to radio. A lot of times people want us to send out 3, 4, 5 singles before the album comes out to college radio. They don't want that. They want the album. So it is going to be a fairly short kind of window, a burst of attention. You shouldn't be working a record for 6 months to college radio. A record is really only viable to college radio for 3 months, and then it's pretty much over. But if you can come back with something else afterwards, then great.
Short burst.
I'm not sure if I was
to long pressure.
Yeah. Whereas on the non-com, it is more of a single by single thing. But you shouldn't even be looking at non-com if you don't have kind of a story. If to be a brand new artist and to be trying to get airplay right off the bat at some of the larger non-com stations is a really tall order, and they're going to be looking. They are going to want to know what else is happening with this band, and so that's why you really have to take it step by step and take it slowly and try to build that story. And that's one of the beauties of college, is that, you are tapping into a passionate fan base that will hopefully engage with you, follow you on your social, stream your music on your Spotify, spread the word through their stations and through their friends. And so that you'll have more of a story going in, if that goes well, you'd have more of a story going into larger things, whether it's not, a formal non-com campaign or a PR campaign or whatever it may be down the line. But that's why you shouldn't be skipping steps. Go do the easy shit first. And college radio is shit.
Start off there.
Build those fans, right? You're not going to recoup. It's not going to be sexy. But these are the people you want excited about your artist. And, because as soon as we go to non-com, they're going to ask, the larger stations are going to ask us, how many streams, how many Shazams, what's the live story, what's the this, it's just a long list of whys, because they're basically looking for a reason not to do something, right? So, which is even more so on the commercial level,
Yeah. So really, to really sum it up, is if you want to break radio, get started now. Hire somebody like Adam. that's going to like get you there, because it is that first step is the most work. It's for the whatever company you are working with, it is the most work, because they have to learn more about you. They have to draft all that up. So when it turns around the second time, they're like, okay, let's just change a few things, and then they have a whole new set of other challenges. But it doesn't make it a lot any easier. It makes certain things easier, but the push there, and you create that momentum. So
yeah, I think, listen, and to your point about press having a harder time, the blogs having a harder time. Yeah, I mean, all those things are true, but I also, you can't not do PR as well. We do PR as well at Planetary. You still got to go after. You still got to have some press, because I mean, if you just think about like when you're pitching larger writers, they're literally Googling the band and seeing who else is writing about this band. Why do I care? What's this band's socials? How many followers, and who else is writing about it? And if nothing comes up, I mean, it's, if you're just looking, if you think about press from a purely SEO standpoint, you gotta have shit on your page, right? Like there's got to be stuff that comes up other than your Bandcamp page and your SoundCloud link, and and your hometown paper, right? So you still gotta do press, and that's where all the assets come in, and the repetition comes in, because it gives you more opportunity to go
right
after
on. All right.
Radio's a lot more, right?
Yeah, well, we do gotta start wrapping up, Adam. I mean, this is fantastic. We'd love to have you back, because we can go deeper each time, and there's so much to cover. It's not something it's not like, oh, here's radio and here's one thing to do about it. So, Adam, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much. Just stick around for a moment. We're just going to do a wrap up screen. All right.
Happy.
Okay, and that's going to be it for today. Thank you all for tuning in. If you want to continue the conversation, leave your comments below and stick around for like the after show. We're going to be doing more of these after shows coming up in time. And Thursday, we're going to be doing New Thoughts, and that's going to be at 2 p.m. on Eastern time. And then we're going to bring back the free form that we kind of do over on Twitch and everything. We got a lot going on. Check out musicindustrycity.com. You can sign up and register for free. We're also doing virtual reality networking events. So we're actually in a completely different world doing all the cool stuff. You don't even need a headset. You can do it right from your desktop. So musicindustrycity.com is where you can find out that information. And you can also find us on your preferred podcast player. Once again, thank you to Sam Tall and Adam Lewis. Have a rocking day. Peace.